ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Ash Farrugia, a very good friend of mine, the founder and CEO of ActivePipe, which was also one of the big sales of the year when it was purchased by Moxiworks over in the US. And Ash, and the topic that we're going to talk today about is like a founder's journey from a bit of a more personal side. And the reason he is dialing in to us is it is both his wife's birthday and their wedding anniversary, and they have 2 children under 3. So in terms of mental health, which is one of the topics we're going to talk about today, it was much more important for Ash to honour his commitments to home than it was to me, which I was completely offended by, but we've worked through it and we're over it now. So
thanks, Katie.
Tell us a little bit, before we start, congratulations on the recent purchase by Moxiworks. Tell us a little bit more about that. How did it come about?
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for the intro. And yeah, thanks everyone for putting up with me virtually rather than, it's a shame I couldn't be there in person. I would have loved to have been able to make the journey. So how did the exit come about? Good question. One of the things as a founder and CEO, you get those spam emails in your inbox all the time, and nearly every advisor tells you to just ignore them. They're just rubbish. There's so many of them. But one of the things I've learnt through the 2 companies I've exited is just don't ignore them. So in ActivePipe's case, what I did was I took every meeting I got offered from one of those spammy type emails. Oh, we buy companies, or we're a private equity firm that buys companies. Took a 15-minute meeting with every one of them and built a database of the ones that I felt comfortable with that were a good fit and there was alignment. I consistently updated them when I was doing investor reports, I'd do a dull down version and ensure every quarter a little report went out to all of those on the list. And Vector Capital approached us who own Moxiworks. So Moxiworks sits under an $8 billion fund, Vector Capital, over in the US, a big fund out of Silicon Valley. They hit us up when I was at Inman in Las Vegas in, I think it was 2018. Yeah. And pretty straight up, but they had all the information on our company because we were keeping everyone up to date with the company and how we were tracking, our trajectory, our SaaS metrics, all of the exciting stuff. And they pretty much laid an offer straight on the table there and then in Vegas back then. But we had so much growth ahead of us and there was just too much on the table to let that go. And, private equity had the reputation of not paying very big multiples. So what we were doing over those, between then and the exit, we were conditioning all of the private equity guys that if they wanted to get involved, it would be a competitive process and we'd be looking for a double-digit, exit, double-digit on valuation exit. So, 10x revenue or something like that at a minimum. So we did a really good job of conditioning them all over the journey. We went out to raise our Series C round in June last year. We were raising around $70 million US to really explode our growth over in the US market. And we sent out the Series C proposal to all of these parties that we'd built up this database from, and it ended up just becoming a majority, buyout competition, and we got the exit away with Vector Capital, and Moxiworks. Awesome. So that's kind of how it came about. It was a long journey, but well worthwhile not ignoring those spam emails.
Yeah. And who are Moxiworks? Because in Australia we hadn't really heard of them before. What do they do?
Well, Moxi are huge in the US. So they've got around 400,000 real estate agents in the US under license using their technology. They're probably, I'd say, the largest market share holder with regards to CRM. And really, if you think about anything that an agent needs to do, essential tools that an agent needs to transact, Moxiworks want to own that technology, and they want to partner with people that are complementary to that, but not essential. So that's kind of, so really for anything from CMA, prospecting, through to listing, nurturing, lead nurturing, database, right through to transaction management and accounting as well.
Awesome. So let's go back to the beginning. How did ActivePipe start, and what was your vision for the business And how did that change across the time that it came for you to sell?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's funny because even now I get a lot of founders asking me, or people that want to start businesses, well, I'm just trying to find the idea, Ash. What's the idea? And every one that I've ever started, including ActivePipe, they never end up, when you sell them, when you exit, they never end up where they were when you started anyway. What you started with is never the end result. And so, what I tell people is just find something that people are willing to pay for, go live, go for it, and then you'll find it through your journey, and you can pivot, right? And so, and ActivePipe was no different to that. We started out as a web-to-print provider for real estate, pretty much like Campaign Track, really, in a sense, what they were doing. We clipped on a bit of lead nurturing as a piece of functionality. I remember it was Jealous Craig that actually requested it out in Victoria. So we built the technology out, and then we started getting organic adoption of that for that function, that piece of technology. And once we started to saw the traction that we were getting on that offering, we did a heap of research. We discovered that there's $6.4 billion worth of leads generated in the US per annum for residential real estate. That's top of funnel. And then brokerages literally knew nothing about what happened to those leads when they hit the CRM. It was just all up to the agent to convert them. So we discovered pretty quickly that there was a middle funnel lead nurturing gap. And once we started to really hone in on that, we just focused and went for it. And we dropped everything else. More importantly, despite having revenue in all those other areas of web to print and that other business that we started as, we turned all that off because we just wanted to focus and be the best in the world at solving one problem and just do it really, really well. And I think that's what kind of paid off for us in the end.
The old inch wide, mile deep, right?
Yep.
So what were some of the biggest... Now, you tell everyone when they meet you that, you were just a motor mechanic when you started out. And obviously the journey's been long and quite challenging. What are some of the biggest personal challenges that you've had over that time?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that don't know, so I started off as a motor mechanic, did my apprenticeship really early. I think I started just before I was 15, and then started my own workshop and built that into a franchise here in Australia as well, and had an exit there. But really, the biggest challenge in this startup in ActivePipe would have been, you go through a journey, right? So you do your seed stage, so everyone's having fun, this is cool, and you're really enjoying being a founder and CEO of a company where you've raised a little bit of seed capital. Table tennis is out, everyone's having a great time, we're solving problems and we're awesome. Series A comes along and, we get a bit of cash in the door and we want to, we're starting to think about hiring some scrappy leaders and, we start putting some leadership into the business and it's go, go, go. And then Series C comes and you're like, oh, fuck, we've just raised $15 million and now we've got to scale. How are we going to do that? And we've just hired all the wrong people to do that can't scale. And in 2018, we had to go through a transition of 50% churn. It was the hardest year of my life. I had to get rid of some amazing people that I connected well with and went through that whole fun journey of ActivePipe with, but they literally couldn't help us scale. They just weren't the right caliber of leader to be able to take us to the next phase. And even personally, for me, I went through a massive transition and being a founder, having to grow through all those stages. Back then, I didn't know how to run a company that was, maybe a $200 million company. I knew how to run a company that might be worth $50 million at the time, but we were growing that quick that, you've got to move quicker than the pace of the business as a leader and CEO, and that is super challenging. The bits that I didn't enjoy, I guess, were the transition from the enjoying the fun of being a startup and that building an awesome culture of just great people, transitioning to, a really rigorous board of directors looking to build shareholder value, and it's all about, building shareholder value and money. That was a tough thing to swallow for me and a really hard transition to make as we grew into a sizable, an enterprise style size business. That was kind of how, that was some of the key challenges for us, for me anyway.
And how did that affect your health and relationships? Because that's often the bit we don't
Yeah,
hear
that's
about,
good.
as founders, right?
Pardon?
That's often what we don't hear about as founders, is that sometimes there's
Yeah.
some really tough emotional stuff that has to be discussed.
Yeah, I've got a super supportive wife, and I'd say that, without her, I wouldn't have been able to build what we built. But I would say that for me personally, look, I went through a mental health crisis for the first time ever through the ActivePipe journey. So we go back to 2018. I had my first panic attack before a board meeting. I didn't even know what it was. I just knew that I was sweating and feeling chest pains and heart palpitations. I thought I was having a heart attack for the first few times. And it really, what it was that, I was panicking because times were tough. We were churning through people. We didn't know how to scale. We'd raised all this money. They're expecting 100% year-on-year growth. I had this going from, 10 million revenue to 20 million ARR was a lot harder than back when we were 1 million to try and get to 2, right? It's 100% year-on-year growth, which is when you're raising capital from VCs, it's grow at 100% or die, right? That's the other thing, right? You choose who you're going to raise money from carefully. And so that's a lot of pressure. And I went through a transition. I think the biggest thing I found was pre that episode, there was a 3-year stint of anxiety. And I, being a hustler, I actually crushed it, right? So it took me 3 years to get over it and get through it. And I'm so glad that it happened because I've become a much better human being. I was a real ego-driven individual back then, and I've been able to dissolve my ego through the whole process and developed a growth mindset through the way that I kind of got through that whole period and building resilience for myself and really hustled my way through it. But it's that resilience that got me through, and I've become a more kind of humble growth mindset kind of person. I listen more and I learn more from people rather than trying to tell everyone I know everything about everything. So I think that was what needed to happen for the company to go where it went. And for me personally, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it was a horrible 3 years. I look back at it now and think that was just, it had to happen because my life's so much better.
Yeah. So how do you manage your mental health now? What are some of the tools that you use?
I'm a bit of a psychopath when it comes to kind of when I get my mind on something and I'm gonna, like, when I first started getting it and people were telling me you're gonna have this for the rest of your life, I was like, bullshit. No, I'm not. So I developed my own routine. Everyone's got to kind of work their own way through it, but it's a journey that when you go through it, if you go through it, that you've all got to find your own way, right? But for me, it's a 5 a.m. wake up, and I'm super disciplined on that. I kick myself if I don't get up at 5 a.m. And an ice bath or a cold shower or a cold walk. If it's freezing cold outside in the middle of winter, it'll be t-shirt and shorts and an hour walk. I do all sorts of stuff like Wim Hof breathing, meditation, yoga, reading, fasting, really just looking after my health. But for me, what it was I found the time, and a lot of people complain about not having the time. And so I thought, well, there's a gap of the day between 5 and 7 a.m. that I'm virtually doing nothing. So get up and build my own routine and spend that time on myself. And I think, I really got all of those things might sound like airy-fairy things, but just a cold shower every day, or for me, in my case, I've bought an ice bath now, but it's one of the hardest things to do, but it builds resilience, right? And the way I look at it is if I can sit there for 5 minutes in an ice cold bath, I can put up with a shitty board meeting or a high pressure environment when running a startup or business. So really for me, that was all just resilience building and putting myself in situations that were uncomfortable to help me get through the journey.
So Ash, what's your advice? I don't think I'm going to go with the ice bath, but what's your advice for founders about how they drive themselves, their team, and how they manage their mental health?
Yeah, I think, well, there's two things I'll say about driving your business and the teams, and 2 books that I think every founder should read. And to be honest with you, without going through these books, I don't think I would have, it sounds corny, but I don't think I would have built the business we built without them. But Good to Great and The Advantage, get them both, read them. Amazing books as you're starting to build and scale. Great books, very data driven and proven methodologies. And a lot of people, I guess I said it earlier, but they complain that they just don't have enough time to be able to do the things I do around resilience building. I think it's incredibly important. It's probably one of the most important things is investing in yourselves. I went through what I went through and all of that mental pain that I went through for 3 years because I didn't focus on myself and didn't put the time and effort in. But investing in yourself is the most important thing. If you want to be a really powerful leader and build a high growth startup, it's critical that you're in good shape. And I let that slip. So, that's one key lesson. And the other one is you've never raised enough money. The amount of bridge rounds we had to do between rounds was incredible, and you never learn the lesson, right? You raise 10 million, you need 20. So always think about that when you're raising capital. You always need more than what you think. And that is one of the biggest stresses, right? When you're running out of capital. One of our rounds, we were out of capital in 3 weeks and we're out still raising and presenting, right? How much stress could you be? How much more stress could you be under? So create that space in your funding, so you've got that kind of bit of fresh air there rather than running on a fine line.
Awesome. Look, Ash, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fantastic having you. Have a great rest of your day.